those visitors in our presence who have graced this august chamber today, recognizing, of course, that this is around 40 years of advocacy, 40 years of fighting, 40 years of ensuring that the needs and the expectations of persons who suffer with kidney disease, that they have a platform, a voice, and that their issues could be brought to a level where policy and legislation will now allow for them to realize that which is rightfully theirs, and that is to have access to the best medical care. So I want to pay special homage to those individuals. I believe that since 2018, that this government has been given an omen, one which speaks to the fact that we are supposed to save lives. And it is one that I think that this government has dealt with in a very, very coordinated fashion. I think that we have done our bidding to ensure that that basic maxim which speaks to saving lives could become a reality for those persons we serve. I believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that what we have done in terms of climate advocacy, what we have done to resist and mitigate the existential threats as it relates to our biodiversity, and now in terms of our health and health care, certainly would attest to a government that has as its fulcrum the emphasis on saving lives. I believe so. And the climate change conversation, because when we are able to say to the rest of the world, through our NDCs, National Determined Contributions, that we are now producing, because of our renewable energy drive, less than 2 million tons of carbon dioxide as it compares to the world over, which produce about 40 billion tons or so, that we are doing our best, not only to save the lives of our Barbadians, but to ensure the global fight as it relates to ensuring that global warming does not interfere and necessarily destroy the lives and the ecosystems as we know it. We have done a lot in terms of ensuring that under the Montreal Protocol, there are chemicals or harmful chemicals that affect the ozone layer, that we have done our reduction and cessation when necessary to ensure again that we are able to save lives from that perspective. And our biological diversity drives are well documented across Barbados in terms of our gullies and our ecosystems to ensure that we are not only saving the lives of our people, but of course our biodiversity and our ecosystems, which are critical to our existence. We have done a lot in terms of health. You would have heard previously that we have now installed our linear accelerator at the hospital, a device that is able to bring radiotherapy in a precise way to treat those organs that are cancerous in a precise way, so that normal healthy tissue would not be affected with linear accelerator machine. We have made a promise to Barbadians. We can now say that we are bringing technology to the forefront of medical care. We have said, and I want to thank the Most Honourable Dr. Jerome Walker, if I'm allowed to call his name, please, for his work in the Ministry of Health to ensure that there was improvement at the accident and emergency, and those improvements, Mr. Speaker, we are all proud of, because there is a different feeling and a different approach when you get into the accident emergency seeking medical care. We have said that the government must advance its oncological response, and plans are now afoot to have a new facility built for oncology and obviously the burn unit. You would have seen, Mr. Speaker, sir, the beautiful building which will house our older persons, the new geriatric facility which will be soon opened. All those things we are doing in terms of our medical care and our advancements to ensure that Barbadians get the best medical care that is available not only in the Caribbean but worldwide. We have said that our community nursing program must be expanded. And you would have seen that we have started with a drive within communities to have the nursing facilities and for persons to be able to bring that nursing care where it meets the ordinary Barbadian. That is what we have said. And I must congratulate the minister and her team for ensuring that this happens. Mr. Speaker, I just went through my preamble to show you that it's not only in terms of health care, but all of our actions, whether it's climate advocacy or actions with ensuring that there's legislation in the transport sector, we are doing everything collectively to save lives in Barbados. And that is why we are here today with the tissue transplant bill that is before us 2026. And Mr. Speaker, what does this bill do to save lives? That is the question that must be asked. What does it do? It allows for, and most members would have spoken earlier, not only regenerative tissue, but as well the non-regenerative. Those organs that are the lifesavers for persons who suffer from end-stage renal disease and other renal illnesses. The lifeline. And when we say regenerative, there are certain tissues that can regenerate. We know the liver cells are known for their regenerative potential. We know, Mr. Speaker, that certain areas of the lungs, and that is why we started, obviously, with this legislation with the kidney, which is organ, non-regenerative. But, Mr. Speaker, with the living lab and the advancements that we are bringing forward, it is only a matter of time before we start in a regenerative way to advance for other organs as well, other cells. The Member of Parliament for Christchurch West spoke about the capacity for stem cell in bone marrow transplant as we look to fight leukemia and lymphoma and other immune deficiency diseases. He spoke about those things. So the visual acuity for this is big and wide because we are starting with our kidney transplant, and I'm hoping and praying that we have a successful one as I speak. But we are starting with this conversation to have the legislation active to be able to do these things in terms of our kidney. But the horizon speaks to regenerative tissue as well. When you look at lung, you look at skin, liver for sure. I was made to understand that there's also a plan afoot to do cornea, which is another aspect of donor and donor transplant. These are the things that we are looking at because we must find every single avenue to save lives. And that is the most important thing that we are doing. That's why we are here, to ensure that there is the legislation. And the Member of Parliament for Christchurch East went through a whole suite of the legislation. He went in to what Barbadians would say the nook and cranny of the legislation, the details of the legislation, from the donors and the recipients. He went as far as to say how persons will be expected to act when the donor is deceased. Because, mind you, in order to have there are only certain organs that we know could be donated if a person deceased. And they went through the legislation as it relates to what is considered legally dead, the irreversible cessation of the circulation of blood, the irreversible cessation of the functions of the brainstem. Those things, because the brainstem may be dead, but the heart may still be working, which is a vital organ. Because when we advance with this legislation, heart transplant will be the next thing under our microscope. Heart transplant, which is essential because here is that vital organ that may not be of use because of a brain dead, the irreversible cessation of the functions of the brainstem. That organ, when donated legally, could be used to save lives. And I'm sure that it takes the heart. It takes the good heart of someone. The minister said that she's one that will give her organs freely. But it takes a good heart. And me and her have similar, or she and I have similar hearts. So I would equally donate my heart, which is full of love, to anybody who wants it, especially those in the silver economy. But my heart is good, and I think that you need a good heart, because we are asking Barbadians. I mean, I hear a person say that like to go back to the grave as they came, but you don't ever go back to the grave as you come. I don't know, most persons in here are short of my voice, who have experienced an autopsy will tell you that the organs are not intact when done. So this notion about going back is just one of those things that is part of, I suspect, our imagination, because the reality is that post-autopsy, the organs are not in the same way as they were when you were born, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I know you would have seen more than one, because in your former, I think you're still active in terms of that lettered profession. But Mr. Speaker, the important thing is to understand that this legislation brings to bear another opportunity for us in this country to be considered your brothers and sisters in a way that never existed before. And as I said before, even after you are considered dead by the legislation, that you can still contribute to life, whether it's a family member, a total stranger. We must be able to operate, even in the medical sphere, with a sense of altruism. I often hear those in the blood bank asking for donations of blood. And the type of society we live in, the type of relationships Barbadians have with each other, I find it sometimes very, very unfortunate that we've reached this stage. But sometimes we only recognize the seriousness of an issue when it hits home, when it's our immediate family, when it's a mother, a sister, a brother. Then we realize what we are dealing with in terms of the medical sensitivities and the importance of our action. So equally, I'm encouraging persons to be involved in those donations, those drives. When you hear the blood bank calling, go and find out what blood type you have and how you could be part of saving lives. Because the fulcrum of my conversation today, Mr. Speaker, is about saving lives. And that is what this legislation essentially will do. And now, Mr. Speaker, I heard the minister speak. She spoke very limpidly about the health challenges, the chronic non-communicable illnesses And the Minister in Health also spoke of it, because the importance of us being able to reduce the incidence by early detection, our testing, and our ability to test and seek medical advice. I think that goes a long way. That preventative and prophylactic approach helps as it relates to the chronic conditions that we are faced with. And we have the clinical data is there to suggest that diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, those things have an adverse effect on kidneys, on liver, on heart, and on small arteries, venous systems. They have an adverse effect on our body. And this is also prime time to speak about those chronic non-communicable illnesses that have taken shape in our country in an unfortunate way, because the information data is there to suggest that these non-communicable illnesses are most of the time responsible for the chronic issues that we have with our organs, our kidney disease, our heart failure, cerebrovascular accidents that happen to many of us in Barbados. The research is there to suggest it. So that is why the conversation about prophylaxis is an important conversation. That is why screening is an important conversation. And that is why family history. I know years ago, medical illness, it was basically taboo. Nobody want to talk. Your great-grandmother had high blood pressure. See, there's no way your mother or my mother or anybody in the family would have known about it. They never discuss it. It was one of those fearful still donkey conversations that you would hear from your grandparents. It was just taboo. But now I think with new technology and access to information, people are more comfortable talking about their illnesses. But unless you have the family history and that genetic information that you can relate to, oftentimes you only find out about a chronic non-communicable illness by happenstance. Yeah, ain't hurting you. You think that it's the heat outside. You think that you drank a little too much. I would not go into the realms of what the member Parliament St. Michael North spoke about. I would not be that libatious. But you drink certain things and you may end up with a headache. I happen to go to the doctor. And you hear that your blood pressure was extremely high, way over the normal limits, way over. Then you recognize by doing your research, making those phone calls, that your great-great-grandmother had high blood pressure, or that your aunt had high blood sugar. Then you have an episode, you may come off a plane or so, and then your head feels like, well, let me go and think, and when the doctor do some routine tests, recognize that your blood sugar was extremely high. But all the time it took for you to get that diagnosis, Mr. Speaker, sir, unfortunately, your organs are exposed to the dangers associated with these conditions, whether it is the hardening of the arteries and the vessels because of the excessive sugar, or the damage to organs and vessels because of the excessive pressure of the blood pushing through. A lot of things can happen at the time you get that diagnosis. That is why early screening is essential for the fight against the vagaries of these chronic illnesses. Early screening. And that's why we encourage men, sometimes, there's another taboo too. Men don't like dirty doctor. They don't like to know that they are sick. They feel emasculated when they find out that they're sick and that the wives or the girlfriends or whoever have to take care of them. They don't feel that is a manly thing. And so most of the time, you will hear men say, "I'm going to the doctor. If we got a headache, then we'll just go home and sleep. And when I get up tomorrow, everything will be fine." But this conversation now speaks to the fact that the illness knows no boundaries, whether it is male or female. It has no boundaries as it relates to children. The information, which is very disconcerting, speaks to the fact that one out of every single child in Barbados, suffers, unfortunately, from obesity. And that is why the diet and exercise must become an equal part of the conversation. How we treat to the diet from our children. The Minister of Health earlier said that the conversation that she was having started at 40 years old. It started from 40 to 80, it went down to 30, it went down to 20. And the pediatrician said, let us start from 0. How we are going to ensure with a proper diet exercise program. Minister in the ministry spoke about the fact that even as I talk, I am exercising. And that those lifestyles that foster a sanitary behavior, those unfortunately also marry themselves to chronic non-communicable illnesses. And that's why the simple things are moving around and doing those things around the house, these chores around the house. I ain't saying to get rid of your garden, no. But help him when he comes on a Saturday to do some gardening. All that brings about movement and exercise, which is critical. So it's diet and exercise. And we have to start the conversation from a young age. Because we are trying it in the schools, and I want to thank the Ministry of Health, Education for their program in the school in terms of reducing those sugars and salty snacks within the confines of the school. But equally, when they leave school, what is the situation? How do we get parents to be part of that conversation? Because, as I said earlier, the data is there to suggest that chronic non-communicable illnesses lead significantly to the heart failure, the kidney disease, and the other diseases that we know that we are faced with as a country. I'm happy that we have reached this stage to be able to offer a new lease of life for persons who are suffering with kidney, heart disease later on, lungs, persons who have different types of cancers will need bone marrow, which is regenerative, I spoke to earlier, and all those illnesses that we can help persons with. We have technology. We cannot let the rest of the world run this Usain Bolt race with us and leave us behind. We must be guarded by legislation, of course, because it is critical to ensure that there is a moral compass here. It is critical to ensure that persons follow the confines of the law, because there are a lot of things that can happen. The road to hell is buttressed with good intent. And I'm saying that we have the intent right here in this parliament to have safe storage and donation of organs and tissue. But there may be other persons out there whose intent may not be on the same trajectory. And they may see it as a business transaction. That's how they may see it. So that's why the legislation is there. I saw in some instances you can get a $500,000 fine or 7 years in prison, $50,000 in other incidents. But the legislation is there for us to have a limpid association with what we are doing in Barbados as it relates to ensuring there's fairness across the board. And that is why we have the Attorney General, who, Member Parliament for Christchurch East, who explained in detail all those things that we expect persons to do to comply with the legislation. I must admit, though, because my colleague from Christchurch West spoke about his colleague who came to him early in the day about a situation as it relates to dental and the Dental Registration Act and what happens with the dentist. And because I was making the point to him that this legislation may not be as nascent as we think. A couple of years ago, I went to get a dental implant, and I was told that I didn't have the bone density to be given the implant because of where it was located. And the dentist explained all these things to me, and after the procedure, he says, it worked good because I was able to use cadaver bone in your gums to be able to build out that area that I had to do the implant. So I asked him, cadaver? What do you really mean? He says, well, cadaver, what does it mean? I got the bone, the treated bone, from a person who passed away. I use it to be able to fill the area for that dental implant. I said, well, you put, I said, you put a dead person in my body? He says, well, you make a choice. You want me to take it out? And you got a big hole in your mouth. He asked me, so you want me to take it out? So I'm saying, the Member Parliament of Christchurch West spoke about it earlier. But it's a fact that this is not exactly new in terms of what happened in Barbados, and successfully so. That was about 20 years ago, and I'm sure if I put my mouth now that you will not know where it is, or you cannot tell me because I didn't know whose tissue was used for the implant. But I can tell you that I must thank that person who was able to donate their bone tissue for that procedure. I must thank them because I have now a full complement of tooth that I can give the morning smell to anybody, young or old. Mr. Speaker, I am happy. We have the legislation. I think that we have been able to titillate Barbadians with our conversation today, to the extent that hopefully from tomorrow we'll have persons like myself, Minister Cummins, and the Attorney General, who is willing to say that when you have gone to the great beyond, that if your organs are of any use to any person, that we are happy, willing, and ready to be part of the legislation which says that the person can have them and have them legally, because we are in a government, Mr. Speaker, sir, to save lives. That is why we are here, to save and to improve the lives of the people in Barbados. And that is a very simple mantra for me. The persons who represent the Barbados Kidney Association, they were fighting. They're still fighting. They were fighting for over 40 years. 40 years to improve the lives of the people from within the association. The 250 or maybe got 300 by now, persons who go through the onerous exercise of dialysis, because it's not easy. Persons like myself who would have worked at some point in time in the hospital and who understands what happens in the medical sphere may have a better appreciation for those hours of dialysis. And then the minister in the ministry spoke about the expense. The millions of dollars, I should think he said up to 7 million. I can't recall the exact figure, but I am saying there's not only an expense, there is a psychological and physical expense as well. There's an expense to family, there's an expense to country, because a lot of the time that you take during the dialysis procedure is time that we use to build Barbados and build Barbados for it better. And that is the essence of the legislation to give now, with a transplant of organ, kidney, those persons the opportunity to live as much a normal life as possible. And the research is there that persons can live successfully with one functional kidney. The research is there. So, and there's also a commitment made from the Ministry of Health to have the immunosuppressant medication available. So it's not only about the organ and the availability of organs to transfer and tissues, but of course it is also the aftercare, the post-operative care in terms of medication. We have the experts, and I want to say to all Barbadians that all doctors here can go anywhere in the world and stand toe-to-toe with any. We have some of the best doctors in Barbados, and I would say so without apology, who have been doing these successful procedures not only here but overseas as well. And they're revered around the world. They were born in Barbados, they were educated here, born, bred, raised, educated, and I want to say that there are shining lights, and long may they continue to do good on behalf of the good people of Barbados, because their job is an onerous one at times, maybe odious based on circumstances, but they come to work with one simple mission, and that's to save the lives of Barbadians. So the legislation not only speaks about the pre-operative care, but post-operative as well. It speaks to the medication that must be available. And I want to also congratulate the ministry for having the living lab and the facilities to do the testing necessary so you can have that genetic linkages, that genetic confirmation as required. This is good legislation. I'm only hoping that Barbadians respond positively, because the ability to save lives is a priceless ability, and it's something that I think Barbadians should be especially titillated with, to be able to go there and say, I am able to help my brother and my sister, to help persons who are in need by giving freely of myself. And that is, Mr. Speaker, the godly thing to do. That is the Bajan thing to do. And I want to endorse this legislation with every single sinew of my being. Thank you. I'm obliged.
Honourable Senanju.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too want to lend my voice in support of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I come from a part of Barbados where communities still rally behind persons when they are sick, where people come out and in an effort to assist those who are vulnerable or sick or who needs help in the community. They do a number of things, community events, they hold raffles. Every so often in the church, you will see a special collection being taken up for persons because there's a member of the church and they're sick. You have the barbecues, you have the cruises, the fetes, fish fries, cake sales. I come from a place where those things are still common. Those things are still expected when someone falls ill within the community and there's something that can be done by the community. Persons in the past would have gone to the MPs, gone to the members of the family, trying to find funds to go overseas to have operations done, have procedures done, because they could ill afford to do it here, or it was not available here in some cases. In the case of kidney transplant, then only life donors were permitted, and then in many cases that was limited to family members. In many cases, if you could go overseas and get it done, you can get it from a donor. That donor could be anybody. So I know that was one of the things that would have restricted persons in the past, and the cost. and the $200,000 or $300,000 that they could not find. And even with all the good intentions, all the fundraisers, we've done a number of fundraisers. You know that it's going to be difficult, extremely difficult, almost impossible in some cases, to raise $300,000. To even raise $100,000 is difficult. If you go on and you ask the MP in the area, and he gives what he can, you're not going to get anywhere near $200,000, $300,000. So some persons, for them, that was, with all the efforts that they could do on their own, that was still pretty much a futile exercise. But what this bill does, Mr. Speaker, is that it gives those poor families in places like Belle Plaine and Hillaby, Orange Hill, Bordens, all across Barbados, those communities where persons who can ill afford, it gives them the hope of a permanent solution, the opportunity to have a transplant done here and fix a problem, and fix an illness that they would not otherwise be in a position to treat to. And you see, if the kidney or the kidney failure, the renal failure, and I grew up in a house with a stepmother who died from renal failure. I've seen how the impact it has on the body, on the person. She was an elderly woman, she was 70, but I've seen younger people who suffer from kidney failure. And if it affected just that person, that would be bad enough, Mr. Speaker. But the fact of the matter is that kidney failure affects not only the individual, it affects the entire family. Person can't work. Good luck for them in Barbados. Our health system is such that they may not necessarily have to pay that $1,100 to $1,200 per session that the members spoke about. They may not have to pay that money up front, but they are there on the machines for hours and hours and hours, and when they come off, they're exhausted, they're weak, they're tired, they cannot work. They cannot support their families. Now imagine that you're in a family, you're in a household, you're sick, but then on top of that, you cannot support yourself, you cannot support your household. Your children, they got to go to school, but they're at school, they're studying, instead of studying their work, they're studying you. Because I've seen how the body wears away with kidney failure. And a child that is studying in school cannot function, cannot study your work if they're coming home to a father or a mother who they know to be strong and healthy and bubbly, and all of a sudden they're home in a bedridden, cannot move, cannot do anything, cannot walk, cannot play with them. That is going to have a psychological effect on that child. Child cannot study their work. Child cannot learn. So it's not only going to affect the person, it's affect the household, the children. And even if you don't have to pay that money, still, if you don't have money to take care of yourself because you can't work, that's going to have an effect on you as well. So this bill gives persons a certain amount of dignity, dignity, when it comes to situations where they find themselves in that position. And I know it's been said here, Mr. Speaker, that this is all new and it's going to require a cultural shift. People are going to have to look at donating organs differently. But I know that for many years we've been donating blood in this country. Whenever somebody that you know from your workplace or somebody from your community or from the branch or from the party or whoever you're associated with, whenever there's a need for blood, I see how people, whenever possible, they rush to those blood banks to give blood. This is nothing new to us. We've never had the opportunity in the past, perhaps, to donate an organ. But when we could have donated to save a life, to extend somebody's time here on earth, we did it. We did it willingly. And I have no doubt in my mind that when the call is made that persons in this country will donate willingly to ensure that their friends can live, that their family, and that strangers, people that they've never met in their lives, will be able to live another day with their family. Mr. Speaker, this bill is about giving people more time. More time. more time to spend with their children, more time to spend with their family, more time to spend in their communities. Yes, we offer the dialysis, and I have known persons who have benefited from that. But if you're there, and you know you have your 3 sessions, you can't attend your child's graduation. In some cases, persons could even attend their child's wedding. Sometimes you can't attend a funeral because it happens to be on the day that you have to go in. And then you're so sick afterwards, you're so tired, so exhausted afterwards, you cannot attend. So you see where we're going here. I know you have an opportunity now for a permanent fix. A permanent fix. Right here in this country. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to try to get it to India, to Canada, to Colombia. You don't have to. You can have the procedure done here in this country. And you can have an organ for anybody who is willing to donate. Now I'm curious to see, going forward, how persons will respond when it comes to donating organs. I know that a family member will not hesitate, a loved one will not hesitate to give an organ or give part of their organ if it meant that somebody will live a longer life in their family and someone they know. But I'm curious because I have a good feeling in my heart that persons will respond positively, as we have responded positively in the past. Communities would take the opportunity to rally together to help with this as well. And then there's the aspect of it that people are concerned about, and that is we've heard, and I've seen it on television, the trafficking of body parts. And I'm glad that this bill speaks to that, because that is something that we have to reiterate, that it's going to be a free-for-all. You're not going to use this opportunity for people to take advantage of people in this country, because there are people in this country that will sell anything. They break into your house now and they steal things and they will sell them. They will find a market for them. But they can't sell the parts. They can't sell the kidney. They can't sell the liver. They can't sell anything, because this bill speaks to that. And there are persons who would sell them for them. It also speaks to that. You can't advertise it. You can't run an ad on IG, on Facebook, saying that, yes, I got a lovely kidney, and if you want it, X amount of dollars. You cannot. That is illegal. And I'm glad that this is done in such a way that not only the wealthy among us will benefit from it. Because in the past, the wealthy could always fly out and get whatever treatment they wanted. They could go up there to North America and they can get the best treatment in the world. But poor persons had to stay and suffer and die. And I'm not going to say that people are not still going to die because of this, because people will die. But the research has shown that with a successful kidney transplant, a person could have an additional 20, maybe 30 years of life if they take care of the body after they have the transplant. I mean, of course, that is going to be determined how healthy they are going forward, because you have to be healthy in the first place. But if you maintain that good health afterwards, then you can have another 20, another 30 years of life. I mean, in some cases, if you get another 10 or 15 years of life, that's priceless. You can't put a price on that. And before, only certain people could afford that. And now we have the average man in the community, the average man on the street now can get access to that kind of treatment here, right here in Barbados. And that's something that must be applauded. So I want to commend the minister and her team for the hard work that they've been doing in that ministry to ensure that ordinary poor people can get this kind of treatment here in this country, because I'm sure there are other places where they would not. It would be a death sentence. We're not here. That's something that I really want to commend them for. The Speaker, I don't intend to speak much longer on this bill, only to give the perspective from the average person, from the small man, how it will impact him, how people's lives will be transformed as a result of the ability now to get a transplant. Because sometimes we don't see the hardship that people go through. You don't see how people are scratching their heads, trying to wonder where they're going to find money, how they're going to get this loan, who they're going to beg to get the money just to pay for medical treatment. We don't see that sometimes. As MPs, sometimes we hear about it because they come to us. They will come to us. If they know us well, they'll come to us early. If they don't, they will come to us eventually. But they do get to us, directly or indirectly. But if you're in the household, if you're there, you see your parents can't sleep because they have a child, they're wondering how they're going to find money. A father can't sleep. They're fretting, they're arguing with one another, they're upset all the time. It's just because they know that they have the stress of trying to find out where they're going to find money just to prolong the life of a loved one. And we see it. It happens in our communities every day. And now this opens a door to hope for such persons. Persons who are invisible, but they're out there. And I'm glad that I can stand up in here this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, and I could lend my voice in support to this bill, because I know it's going to make a big difference out there for the average Barbadian. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I want to again associate myself fully with this piece of legislation. I thank you.
Honourable President Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to join in the debate on this bill. And it asks us as a parliament really one question. When science allows us to save lives, what does the law do? What do we as parliamentarians do? So there are some bills that regulate. There's some bills that modernize. There's some bills that come to Parliament to tidy up administrative matters. So this is not one of those bills. Sir, this is a bill about life. It is a bill about hope. It is a bill, sir, that will give Barbadians the opportunity to celebrate another birthday. A parent or grandparent to experience Christmas with their loved ones again. To see a son play a sport for his national team, a daughter get married, and a grandchild take their first steps. Mr. Speaker, that is why I wholeheartedly rise to support the bill, and I want to commend the Honourable Minister for the manner in which she presented it today, sir. When all is said and done, when science gives us the opportunity to save lives, the law must keep up. Mr. Speaker, every week in this country, they sit quietly beside their dialysis machines, some 3 days a week, 4 hours at a time, week after week, month after month, year after year. While many of us are planning our week, sir, they are planning their next dialysis appointment. While some of us will worry this evening about traffic as we leave this place, others are worried about whether their bodies will hold up another day. That is the graphic reality, sir, that faces every dialysis patient. The mothers, fathers, the teachers, the police officers who have to deal with that, public servants, or neighbors or friends. It is, sir, every Barbadian's wish to just simply live an ordinary, peaceful, and happy life. This is why this bill matters, sir, because transplantation is not simply a matter about a medical procedure. It is about hope. It is about freedom. Freedom from the dialysis machine, sir. Freedom from the constant hospital visits. Freedom from enormous medical bills. for freedom to return to work and to do the things that you love, a freedom to travel, a freedom to dream again. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that every member of this chamber can agree that if Parliament has the opportunity to give more freedom to Barbadians, then we have a duty as parliamentarians to act. Some may ask, sir, why no? Some may ask, why have we not done it before? But that is not the answer to those who are listening, who are waiting on their next dialysis treatment, who have now come home from the hospital after an exhausting day. We live in a country, sir, where kidney disease is increasing. Diabetes is prevalent. Non-communicable diseases, sir, continue to increase while our population ages. And our healthcare system has had to evolve in a very curious way to deal with that very overwhelming mix of circumstances, sir. The question is not whether we need the legislation. The real question is, how are we going to help those people when this legislation is implemented? Sir, because the bill is not just about kidneys, it's about confidence. Confidence that every donation will be voluntary. That is embedded in the legislation, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch East did a good job in setting out what are the legal parameters of the legislation. But the bill also speaks about the confidence that every family will know that they will be treated with dignity in a trying time. Confidence that every transplant will be carried out ethically and professionally. That is embedded in the legislation. There's also confidence, sir, that no one will profit from another one's suffering. That is why this legislation has been so carefully crafted, and the ministry has taken the time to get it right. It is not perfect, sir. A time will come, like any other bill, when this legislation becomes law, that time and experience will show, sir, that it would require amendment, because technology, especially Christchurch West spoke to, which should suggest that we need to update the legislation. This bill, sir, says very clearly that human tissues are not for sale, and that human life is not a commodity. It also reinforces that compassion can never become commerce. That deserves the full support of this House. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also want to speak very briefly about something else which jumps out to me about this legislation. Something that perhaps doesn't receive enough attention. It is not simply about today's medicine. It is about tomorrow's medicine, sir. Around the world, sir, medicine is changing before our eyes. Technology is changing the way in which practitioners, medical practitioners, are able to discharge their duties to their patients. Stem cell therapies that the Honourable Member for Christchurch West spoke to. Regenerative medicine, sir, tissue engineering, and my favorite, artificial intelligence in supporting diagnosis. We've seen since COVID the impact of how doctors can stay at home or at their surgeries and their various practices, sir, and be able to give accurate diagnosis to a patient using AI. Precision medicine is also a part of this new development, sir. Sir, these are no longer ideas for the future. This is the reality of how our healthcare system has to evolve and has to continue evolving. And sir, with this legislation, Barbados has a choice. We can wait for the future to arrive, or we can prepare for it. And I believe this bill says that we will prepare for the future, sir, because it creates the legal certainty, which, sir, you know that I agree, and you would agree, is very important. It will allow the doctors to innovate. It would allow people in all of the bio fields whether it's biochemistry, bioengineering, in medicine, medical technology, all the various fields in that science to innovate. It allows the researchers, sir, to explore. It allows us to build up a cadre of young professionals across those scientific fields to feel that we have a medical field that can support innovation and creativity. And it allows also to bring capital to invest in medical science, in building out the health sector in this country. It says to every young Barbadian studying medicine, every young Barbadian that's studying biology, biochemistry, that your country believes in your talent. And this trend-setting legislation will not only create a platform for those patients who need an organ transplant, to get an organ transplant and to increase the number of transplants we're doing at our hospitals, but also the back-end services that are necessary to support those surgeries. Sir, it says to the Barbadians who are studying overseas in these new technologies, who are mastering the research, that they can come back home and contribute to this country's development. It says to the people who look to the countryside and dream of what the horizon offers on the coast, that our inland environments can become places where people can come and convalesce and enjoy the beautiful country air of a St. Thomas countryside, sir. For too long, Mr. Speaker, a number of our brightest medical professionals have had to leave Barbados to find opportunities to practice cutting-edge. This legislation puts Barbados back into that conversation, back into the consideration of coming back home, back into the possibility that they can contribute to this country's development. Imagine if more expertise could flourish here. Imagine the partnerships that young Barbadians forge when they go to university could be developed in this tropical paradise. Imagine, sir, the research partnerships, the grants, the fellowships that would happen as a result of legislation such as this in building out the Barbadian sector as ripe for investment. Sir, medical innovation can be another pillar of our national development. And this is not wishful thinking. There will be some that will say, well, look, well, they're in there discussing this thing, but this is not going to bring any advantage, sir. Medical science, sir, has been part of what we call the medical tourism. We have seen it where innovation has led to one of the leading centers for fertility in Barbados in the world, operating for decades, and the country has benefited from that. So it's not wishful thinking. So good laws don't merely regulate the society, but they must unlock potential. There's also a financial reality that we can't ignore, as some of the honourable members, particularly Honourable Member for St. Michael North, said. The dialysis saves lives. No one disputes that. But dialysis is also expensive. And it is expensive if there's continuous treatment over many, many, many years. A successful transplant, while being a significant upfront cost, will not cost what continuous dialysis over 2 or 3 decades will cost her. It gives a return to independence, a return to productivity, sir, and to normal life. Mr. Speaker, one of the greatest strengths that this bill has is that it balances compassion with the safeguards that are embedded in the legislation. It does not leave matters to choice. Clear oversight is established in the legislation, and Barbadians can take comfort that this legislation will not allow people to be exploited by persons seeking to profit in the trade of organs. It establishes accountability and transparency. It protects both the donors and the recipients. It protects the families in need of securing a cure to an illness that has debilitated a member of the family household. Because confidence is everything, sir, I am happy that the bill embeds that at its core. The truth is, sir, that if people trust, they will donate. It can't work if there is no trust in the system. And that is why the legislation is written in the way it has been written. If people donate because they trust the system, then more lives are saved, Mr. Speaker. It is as simple and as profound as that. Sometimes Parliament will debate legislation that people will forget. There's nothing there. This bill is not one of them. We all know people who suffer from diabetes or some illness that this legislation will make their lives more enriching and more ennobling in the future. Sir, with those few words, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to give my full support to this piece of legislation that is before this Honourable House, and to indicate that whilst the Minister of Health in her presentation, I think, laid it out quite clearly why this intervention is important, the support of honourable members have reinforced those points, sir, with the population. And so we appreciate, sir, that in 2026, Barbados, having spent a considerable amount of money over the years, sir, in watching the trajectory with respect to the evolution of NCDs on the population, I think it is not just timely that we are able to put a regime in place that provides alternatives with respect to how we manage healthcare, at least at the policy level, sir, but really to give families additional options that we hope, sir, will bring better lives for individuals, but I think in the long run, sir, to have Barbados be able to sustain its population in a healthy manner. But the truth is, sir, that this piece of legislation is really at the end of a spectrum, sir, that we have to make sure that, one, government is able to keep pace with the challenges that are facing the population and to be able to create an environment within which not just education, sir, because public education is going to be fundamentally important if this intervention is going to be successful. And I heard the honourable member for St. Thomas who just spoke about trust. Because I too, sir, thinking about who could benefit from my organs, should I decide to be a donor, sir. And people's conception, sir, about the value of life. And therefore, as a society, we're really going to have these genuine conversations around our own mortality and what we can do with our organs and who they can benefit after we have passed. And these are conversations that are not easy to have because we all have our prejudices, sir. And I would like to believe, sir, that I live a reasonably good life. And in living a reasonably good life, sir, I would like to know that my organs will help somebody else to live a reasonably good life. And these are conversations that people will need to have to dispel, sir, any prejudices that people may have about not just wanting to donate, but might wish, sir, that, within certain bounds, that people will like to see that recipients, in getting a second lease on life, so to speak, will appreciate, sir, that the sacrifice, if you like, sir, particularly after death, but I know that in some instances we will be able to do so before, if persons decide to become organ donors, sir, that these conversations are live conversations that must happen right across our communities, sir, in Barbados. And therefore, the trust element within this process, I think is fundamentally, sir, important, which the government, in regulating this particular space, sir, will have to ensure that there's very open transparency in relation to how these things are effected. And so we are seeing, as the minister indicated, sir, a significant increase in costs, sir, in relation to treating NCDs in this country. And to the extent that this is now an intervention that allows families and individuals to be relieved of some of those costs, I think is particularly significant. Now, sir, some of the conditions that people may have are congenital, which may be, obviously, sir, means from birth. And in a sense, I know that in Barbados, when we speak of the cost of living, we tend to focus, sir, on food prices, we tend to focus on electricity, gas prices, and those types of everyday, as we would call it, sir, going into market and affordability issues. But Barbados has been faced, sir, with an NCD crisis that also reflects the actual cost of living, sir. Because the more people who are being afflicted with NCDs, and NCDs, as you and I both know, sir, are for the most part lifestyle diseases, which means, sir, that we get to determine the severity with which we are afflicted with these diseases. The reality is that whilst the everyday costs are real, for thousands of Barbadians, sir, the actual cost of living, whether it is insulin, sir, whether it's the blood pressure medication, sir, we hear the minister, the member for St. Michael North speak about the cost of the dialysis, sir, in the chamber today, the cost, sir, of repeated doctor visits, and whilst my wife may disagree, I go to the doctor regularly, every year, and every 6 months to get checked up and stuff. She would like me to go a little more often. But the reality is, sir, repeated doctor visits is a cost. If you are managing these cares, sir, the cost of travel for the treatment, all of these contribute, sir, to the actual cost of living in this country. And from the perspective of managing NCDs, the government, in putting this particular intervention in place, sir, is part of how we see the spectrum of responding, sir, to some of these costs. And so between the financial costs, sir, the emotional costs, the physical costs associated with this, sir, I can only imagine that putting this in place helps us to be able to alleviate some of those issues, sir. But it doesn't stop there. Because as I've indicated to you, sir, the ministry, as a matter of fact, sir, just today, over the next couple of days, the government of Barbados will be meeting on a mission to finalize aspects of the debt for social swap, sir, which will focus on health. And with specific focus, sir, on how are we able to change behaviors and health-seeking practices in Barbados. And to the extent, sir, that we already have an NCD epidemic in the country, sir, Recently, we were told that 42%, sir, of our children are either overweight or obese. And therefore, that number, sir, basically 1 in every 2, means that if we do not get the school nutrition policy right, sir, that those children will just be the feeding stock, sir, the feed stock on the NCD trail, sir. And therefore, when we talk about the cost of living for these children growing into adulthood, sir, all of the costs that I laid out there, whether it is insulin, dialysis, any of those things, sir, those are some of the things that we'll be facing those children. And whilst we're here to deal with transplants, sir, and encouraging people to be donors, part of government's responsibility is to look at the total policy. So this bill is important to give persons who are suffering right now an opportunity to not suffer. And as we all know, sir, transplants are complicated procedures, because you got to find a match, sir, in the first instance. You got to hope, sir, that in finding the match, then that your body does not reject that which you have been given, and therefore there is really no guarantee of success. But it is an opportunity, nevertheless, for us to be able to save lives. But the government, sir, and working with the rest of the country, sir, we want to make sure that in effect, sir, we really want to reduce the demand for persons who may need transplants in the first place. Therefore, reducing the number of people, sir, who are coming down with severe NCDs and can't manage their circumstances, sir, such that it's not that it is a cost issue, sir, it is a quality of life issue. And therefore, what we are doing with the Ministry of Health and with the Ministry of Education is so important, sir, that whilst we are providing this particular regulatory framework today to help those who are already afflicted, sir, that we need to ensure that people in this country, sir, that we can work together, take the right decision, sir, to change whatever part of our lifestyle we may need to change, sir, to ensure that we can better manage, sir, our affairs. And health, sir, is the wealth of any nation, and therefore we want people to be spending their time, their money on things that are of importance to them. Don't get me wrong, sir. If something wrong with you, go to the doctor and spend the money and make sure that you find out what it is. But if you can prevent the very thing from happening, sir, then I think that's a good bet. That's a good bet, sir. And therefore, whilst government is putting this framework in place, and I can only imagine the work for the Ministry of Health now really will begin even in more detail and more earnest, because this framework is unforgiving. Because, sir, with giving people hope, we now have to deliver. And therefore, sir, you have to convince people to be donors in the first instance, sir. We have to educate people who will be recipients as to the quality of the organs that they will be receiving, sir. We have to educate all of our stakeholders, sir, in the process, so that, as you know, sir, we live in an age of misinformation. And therefore, the Ministry of Health, the government, the medical fraternity must be, sir, the nurses, everybody must be in the forefront, sir, in being able to speak with Barbadians, and don't leave it to the minister or the ministry alone. This, sir, is a whole of country educational approach that we now must dispel any misinformation or anything that might be put out there, sir, that could dissuade Barbadians from making a decision, sir, that could be to their benefit in the long term. And so I come back to the point, sir, that in shaping some financial engineering. I know that the Ministry of Agriculture will be working with the Ministry of Education, will be working with the Ministry of Health, with the nutritionists, to ensure that we can reduce that 42%, sir, of obesity and overweight children over time, aggressively, so that the demand, as I said at the back end, sir, with respect to the number of people who may need some type of transplant down the road, is actually reduced. Whilst we give the people a new lease on life today, as the system is rolled out, sir, so that they can go into the communities and tell people, look, whilst I've been the beneficiary of this particular intervention, I want you to know that I was going on that road too. And that is not a road that you really want to travel, because we need ordinary Barbadians talking with ordinary Barbadians to help change the mindset, sir, around the lifestyle and the choice, the dietary choices, sir, that some of us are making, and to the extent then that we can better manage, sir, our NCD profile. And so this is particularly, sir, important. It means more screening, sir. Programs have to be rolled out across our communities, which I know is part of what we weren't waiting on the swap to do it, sir, but the swap is just going to add on top of what the ministry has already started, sir. And therefore, we want to encourage people, sir, to stay tuned to the information from the Ministry of Health. Now, sir, we've spoken a lot about dialysis, kidney failure, sir, and the like. Now, you and I both know, sir, there are some Bajans, sir, who like to take a little sip, sir. And I, too, sir, have been trying to encourage Barbadians, sir, to invest in rum bonds rather than...
I think to invest in what, Honourable Member?
To invest, sir, in rum bonds.
Not boss bonds.
Rum bonds, sir, rum bonds. Rum. Because, and I'm being very serious, sir, the reality of how we live. Barbados is rum, rum is Barbados. It is part of our history, sir. But the reality of all of what we are saying, sir, is that we need to understand, sir, what we are doing to ourselves cumulatively over time. And I think to the extent that how we consume, and I know that an individual will have their choices, sir. Each one of us may have a little vice, sir. The reality is that those vices may contribute, sir, to some level of ill health. Those vices, sir, may contribute to your cost of living, sir. And therefore, indulgences, not vices, sorry, indulgences. My apologies, sir, indulgences. And therefore, whilst I know that men will be men, sir, we have to support each other in relation to encouraging more men, sir, to not just go to the doctor more often, but actually find out what is happening in our lives, sir. Because oftentimes, it is usually too late when your wife or your girlfriend or your mother or your sister or somebody confuse you enough, sir. And this legislation today may very well present an opportunity for a lot of men to live healthier lives, sir, get a second lease, as I indicated earlier. But we have to want to be around, sir, for our families. And I hope that as we work with the Ministry of Health to bring about a new level of awareness as to how we want people to better live their lives and wanting people to be around for longer, sir, to support their families, I think we owe it upon us, sir, to make sure that we have those conversations in our immediate circle, sir, so that whether it is the screening program, sir, that we support each other as men, sir, the women are already look after themselves for the most part, sir, and they try to help us to look after ourselves. I think we men, sir, have to show up and take some responsibility, sir, for wanting to be around longer to help.
Honourable, that's a very wide, I don't want to intervene. Honourable, that's a very wide and general statement you just made.
I'm trying to make sure, sir, that
Perhaps you might be better particularize it rather than have it so general. It's a little bit on the general side.
Yes, sir. I reiterate, sir, in all seriousness, that if this intervention is going to be successful, the conversations must be had not just at the level of government, but in our homes, in our communities. And to the extent that we as men can have those conversations amongst ourselves, along with our partners and our wives and spouses and the like, sir, I think it is an important initiative that needs to be undertaken, because we can do better. And I hope that as we are working with the Ministry of Health to bring in a new paradigm shift in relation to how people live, how we eat, how we drink, sir, how we exercise, how we seek out medical attention, how we analyze that information, and appreciate that the medical profession, the doctors, sir, they are there to advise us, sir, as to what is the appropriate path. In the same way, sir, that if I get into trouble, I come to you, sir, for advice. And when you give me the advice, sir, I can follow you, because I know you can put me right, sir. And therefore, in much the same way, I hope that with this very important initiative, that more Barbadians, sir, will not just seek to understand what it might mean to be a donor, and how their own lifestyle in terms of how the screening will be done would allow them to become donors, and that we have the right level of education, sir, right across the population, so that people can in fact, sir, make those decisions, not just for themselves, but I believe, sir, make the decisions that is in the best interest, sir, of the family. Our healthcare system, sir, is evolving. We're investing a significant amount of resources to expand the capability of the healthcare system. And as our population is getting older, sir, by 2050, sir, it is estimated that half of the population will be over 65. And therefore, it is going to be important, sir, that we appreciate and understand that with that evolution, if half the population is going to be over 65, and we have almost 1 in 2, sir, of our minor population being overweight and obese, sir, then it means that we have at two ends of the spectrum, sir, some issues and challenges that we have to address. And this bill, I believe, is part of that solution. We will work with the Ministry of Health for them to be able to execute what will be a very aggressive, I don't like the term public relations, but it's really a strong educational program, sir, over the next 3 years that I think will put Barbados on a completely different trajectory than those numbers would suggest. Because we want, sir, to improve the lives of Barbadians. We are strengthening, sir, our healthcare system. We want to help reduce, sir, what I describe as the real cost of living, where people are afflicted with severe NCDs and the associated costs financially, emotionally, and otherwise, sir, that comes with trying to manage that care is important. And we want to make sure, sir, that where ill health can be prevented, sir, that we as individuals, we as communities, that we can do our part, sir, to make sure that we can prevent ill health. As I said at the beginning, sir, there are things that happen to people from birth, which naturally means that you have to live with these things over life. But with the innovations that we're seeing here, I believe that we might be able to find some solutions with respect to that, sir. And I hope that once we have passed this bill here with I ask Barbadians to give 100% support to the Ministry of Health and Wellness, sir, and the partners, sir, that they must engage with, certainly with the Ministry of Education, to ensure that we can turn what might appear to be a crisis into opportunities that the average Barbadian, sir, can see a tangible benefit with respect to improvement in their lifestyle. And with those very few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member Stimaka's office.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no intention of detaining this place, but I do feel it necessary to rise in relation to this particular debate to be able to offer support to the Honourable Minister from the other place, and also to support those who have fought to be able to get us to this point. Now, while I appreciate that many people have played a significant role in getting us to today, I recognize that the reason that this piece of legislation that we're about to pass today has certainly not met the level of opposition and the criticism that it ordinarily might do is because I think both political parties have had a hand in being able to shape the bill. I understand, Mr. Speaker, that from back in 2015, when the first transplant was done, it was not under Barbados Labour Party administration, but the work was started by the doctors at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to be able to move in this direction. And I think that today we must recognize that while as a party we have come to office in 2018 and we have continued to push for this work to be done, that there must be acknowledgement beyond this party and certainly this government, and certainly recognize the people who would have worked through both administrations, as well as certainly the doctors who would have been there back in 2015 and I'm sure before, being able to push forward the process. Obviously the associations as well that have been a part of this process ought to be commended as well, because I know that they have certainly been both in the forefront and also in the background, making the calls to MPs. Certainly I have received many calls from not only persons from the association, but also from people who have experienced, for instance, kidney failure and have been going through dialysis and have wanted basically this legislation to come to the fore. I believe it was my colleague, the Attorney General, who he and I were at a meeting in his constituency on one occasion where a gentleman made a plea to us to be able to have this legislation and this bill brought before Parliament as a matter of urgency because his wife was a sufferer and is a sufferer and wanted to be able to have a degree of hope that our legislation would be able to be passed quickly so that she would be able to get the necessary relief here in Barbados. So I rise today really to offer full support for the bill. It is a significant and I believe a forward-looking piece of legislation. It has the potential to transform the healthcare delivery in this island and also to bring what I consider the most important thing, which is renewed hope for the citizens of this country to be able to know that if they find themselves in the unfortunate circumstance that they may require a human transplant, that the legislation now exists in Barbados or will exist after today in relation to being able to seek the necessary care that they need. The bill represents, though, more than a legal framework for transplantation. I believe it represents the compassion and the dignity, as well as the medical advancement and also our collective responsibility to protect and preserve human life. It establishes the safeguards which are necessary to ensure that transplantation occurs ethically, that people aren't doing it behind closed doors, and that we don't have any back door or back room operations being established to be able to do this. It also establishes a way for us to do this in a transparent way, and also with the highest respect for both the donor as well as the person who is receiving the donation. Mr. Speaker, this legislation is particularly important when we consider it against the changing health realities across Barbados. As the last speaker was noting the numbers and others who have spoken, I looked at some of the statistics online, and I want to reinforce the fact that we are dealing with a situation where the non-chronic communicable diseases account for roughly 83% of deaths in this island. Of course, the leading causes being strokes, prostate cancer, diabetes, and kidney diseases. We therefore, I believe, Mr. Speaker, have to ask ourselves a very important national question. And the question is whether we are moving fast enough to tackle the growing burden of chronic non-communicable diseases in Barbados. Because from what everyone has said, we get to this point where we've had to take this action because in many cases, some may be genetic, but some, from what the records are showing and the statistics show, a lot of these challenges that people face can also be avoided with the right care of their bodies and certainly the right things that they take as well. So when you have things like diabetes and hypertension, which continues to place a significant burden on our population and our healthcare system, I believe that is cause for concern, Mr. Speaker. These conditions are major contributors to kidney failure, to heart disease, to strokes, to blindness and other serious complications. And while genetics might influence risk, many of the drivers of these diseases are associated with lifestyle factors, including unhealthy diets, which are high in sugars, salt and unhealthy fats, a lack of physical activity, obesity, tobacco use, harmful alcohol consumption, and delayed diagnosis, because we know Bajans often don't like to go to the doctor to find out exactly what is wrong with them. And perhaps the most troubling one is the fact that people, sometimes when they know, they do not take the adequate management for their conditions that is required. So you have situations where people are supposed to be on medications, they're not taking the medication, and then when they have a chronic episode which results in them having to go to the doctor, then you discover that the reason why they're at that point in terms of having a stroke or a heart attack is as a result of them not taking the particular steps that were required. The reality is that we are seeing the consequences of not addressing these issues every single day in our hospitals, in our clinics. When we do our own clinics, I believe, and our interaction with the general public, we see the signs of people not taking control of their own eating habits as well. We see it in terms of the families that are struggling with the loved ones. We are constantly talking about how we have an aging population, how we're not having enough people bearing children. But I don't know if the reality is hitting home, Mr. Speaker, that it will mean that in the next few decades that the generation that is suffering with the chronic diseases will die out. And if we don't get on top of things, we're going to have another generation coming up which is going to be plagued with a number of chronic non-communicable diseases. This is a problem, and it is something which I believe that while we speak today in this debate, I think that this is about this legislation, I think that we have to deal with these issues running in parallel to any public education programs that are going to be done on this particular bill as well. Approximately 70% of the persons who receive the hemodialysis in Barbados have kidney failure linked to uncontrolled diabetes and hypertension. So this reality requires a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, we have to strengthen prevention, we have to take a look at health promotion, and we have to look at early intervention so that fewer Barbadians reach end-stage kidney disease. At the same time, we have to ensure that those who do develop kidney failure have access to the best possible treatment options, including transplantation. And that is why we are here, Mr. Speaker, today. Chronic kidney disease occurs when the kidneys can no longer adequately filter waste, regulate fluids, and maintain the body's internal balance. And for many patients, dialysis becomes necessary to sustain life. Many of the people that I know who are on dialysis, it is gruesome just listening to them in terms of how their daily lives, their work life, their social lives are disrupted as a result of them having to maintain appointments and keep the balance. And I think most of us in here know at least one or two people who have been impacted. I'm sure you do as well, Mr. Speaker, who have been impacted by this. Based on the statistics that we have heard, we have approximately 270 Barbadians receiving government-supported dialysis. I believe for me, those are 270 too many. Dialysis is a life-saving treatment, but it places a significant physical, emotional, and a financial burden on the patients and the families. Many patients must attend the treatment 2 or 3 times each week, often for several hours at a time. The cost to the healthcare system, we've heard from the minister as well, is substantial. Sometimes a dialysis session can cost approximately $1,000 to $1,200. Annual costs being estimated at $55,000 to $60,000 per patient. These numbers, Mr. Speaker, I am repeating them because I don't know that Barbadians fully appreciate the cost of healthcare and the cost of not taking control of their circumstances as well, for those who can, because I know that there are some who can't, but for the ones who can, this is perhaps more of a reality check to be able to understand what the cost of not doing the right thing will be in the long term. It therefore means that things like transplantation requires significant upfront investment, but the long-term benefits are obviously considerable. And more important, the transplantation provides patients with improved quality of life, a greater independence, fewer hospital visits, and of course an increased life expectancy. And that is what we want for all Barbadians who are affected in this way. We currently perform approximately 4 to 5 kidney transplants annually. The objective of increasing this number to 10 to 12 procedures each year is both, I think, realistic, but it is also necessary as we aim to be able to build the national expertise and to improve the outcomes for the patients. The focus on the kidney transplantation, though, is strategic because it allows us to strengthen our systems and our workforce before considering more complex procedures such as liver and heart transplantation. So in essence, we intend to get to the point where we can do more, because when I look at the things that are covered by transplantation, we're talking about the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, the pancreas, and the intestines. I believe the intestines being the more complicated type of transplantation that can be done. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, that I hope that it doesn't become easier when this legislation is passed for persons to have to go through private facilities in order to get transplantation done. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, because a practice has developed in this land where many patients attending the Queen Elizabeth Hospital have expressed concern that there are challenges sometimes in being able to get an appointment to be able to have the surgeries done and to have certain care done on a regular basis. And oftentimes they are told, and I have come to believe that this has to now be the truth and nothing but the truth, Mr. Speaker, because too many people continue to say it. I've heard it from the time I was a child. So this is nothing of recent vintage. I've heard it over and over, and I think that we are still grappling with this issue, that you will be told in a hospital that if you go through the doctor privately, that you are going to be able to fast-track getting your surgery done, rather than having to wait to get it done through the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Mr. Speaker, I welcome this legislation, but I pray and I hope for the people who are depending on this legislation to make the change, that we do not find ourselves in a situation where, while we experiment to get to the point where we can do many of these surgeries that fall under the classification of transplantation, that we do not create another bottleneck for people who are suffering, whereby almost a medical mafia determines that if you come privately, you may be able to get fast-tracked through the system, as opposed to being able to put the systems in place at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to ensure that people are able to get their treatment quickly. I hope that that is not the case, Mr. Speaker, and that we can move in a direction where not only in relation to transplantation, but that a day will come, and I hope I am alive to be a part of that memory, where the complaints regarding these issues become less. I know that there are constraints within the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I know that they did not start yesterday, but I believe that certainly as I have now turned the corner at that half mark of my life, that I would hope that the next 50 years of my life, that I can actually live long enough to hear that we have made a conscientious effort to reduce the number of complaints from the general public where they believe that they are getting the turnaround when they are supposed to get access to an appointment, a surgery at the hospital. I know we are working on things, Mr. Speaker, and the Honourable Minister knows that I speak from a place where it is out of the greatest concern for the people who I represent and I interact with daily. I cannot speak from any other place, Mr. Speaker, because I have to face those people on a daily basis, and therefore I am highlighting it as a matter of urgency that while we do all that we do, that we also focus on making sure that this bill, when it becomes law, does not give the hope to those who right now feel hopeless, but at the same time, that it creates a situation where people are now on long waiting lists to be able to be administered care, or that they find themselves in a situation where it may be cheaper to go private or quicker to go privately to be able to have the relevant care administered. Mr. Speaker, this bill provides a strong foundation for the work that has already been set in motion. So apart from that concern I have, I want to make it clear that I am committed that this bill, we are going in the right direction, but we got to get it right. The establishment of the National Transplantation Council, which is set out in this bill, provides a multidisciplinary approach to the governance, bringing together expertise from medicine, nursing, bioethics, law, civil society, donors, and recipients. The appointment of a designated transplant officer or officers is also a critical safeguard. And these officers in this bill are intended to ensure that the process is transparent, that consent requirements are followed, and that donors, guardians, and families are properly supported and represented. So for me, I would want that perhaps in the wrap-up, when the minister speaks, that again, as I have asked on other occasions, when we bring legislation, perhaps a few words in relation to once the bill becomes law, the length of time that we can expect the framework of this bill to take effect. I think it is a fair question that I know I'm going to be asked by those who are affected. And I think that it is appropriate that we have some understanding of the timeline for the appointment of certainly the additional staff that may be required, for the council to be put in place, so that people know, is it 3 months, is it 6 months, has the work already started? I know that the minister is a stickler for getting things right, so I have no doubt that she has already applied her mind to how we are going to get this to take effect. But I think it is important that we leave here this evening with people who are afflicted and who are expecting and having the hope that there is going to be a change, that they also understand what the future holds in terms of the turnaround time for this to be done. Consent is at the heart of ethical transplantation. The bill provides clear protections for the living donors, for the deceased donors, and for minors. And adults can donate regenerative or non-regenerative tissue after receiving appropriate medical advice and providing informed consent. The legislation before us also ensures that individuals have the ability to withdraw consent. And one of the interesting things, and I believe the Honourable Attorney General and his team would have looked at this, where in other jurisdictions, it is almost mandatory that your organs can be taken, whereas what we have sought to do, and I believe it is because of how Barbadians or culture or society, you have the ability to opt in to a human transplantation. It is not a case of that they can take your organs when you die, but rather the opposite way. And I think that that is something that speaks to an understanding of how Barbadians not only think, but how they're likely to respond. I don't think Bajans want to be told what can be done with their organs. They want the ability to be able to say what will be done with their organs and to be able to give that consent, which I know that is necessary. The legislation also provides special protections for children. The removal of non-regenerative tissue from a living minor is prohibited, and strict safeguards apply where regenerative tissue donation is considered. And these provisions demonstrate that this bill replaces dignity, autonomy, and protection of vulnerable persons at the center of transplantation. Mr. Speaker, we must also recognize the extraordinary generosity of organ donors and their families. I believe honourable members spoke about this before. But the reality is, whether it is a living donor who chooses to give a kidney or other organ to another person, or a family that honors the wishes of a loved one after death, organ donation represents one of the greatest gifts that one person can give to another, the gift of life itself. I recall, Mr. Speaker, a young child, I believe at the time she was probably about 6 years old, and her case was one where her tummy was enlarged. She was very slim, young girl, and she suffered with a condition which required her to have a liver transplantation, one which could not be done in Barbados. And why this bill, I support this bill, is because, you know, the young lady's mother wanted, both her mother and her father wanted to be at the center of being able to give their organs to her. Unfortunately, we were not in a position here to be able to do it at the time. But one of the things that struck me back then in speaking to the doctors, and let me just say that this child is still alive. One of the difficulties was, it was a few difficulties. One was that because of some other complications, to do surgery may have led to her death through the actual surgical intervention. It may not have improved the quality of her life at the time. But I recall that one of the other concerns of the medical team was the cost of the intervention. And it was at that point, as a young MP, that I realized how sometimes we put a price on life. And I pray and hope again that in relation to this, while we have set up the structures to make sure, or we will be setting up the structures to ensure that there is some clarity in terms of who gets the donation and what priority they come in at, that perhaps the regulations, I know the bill does not currently come with the regulations, but I believe that that is an important factor in being able to allow people to understand the pecking order of being able to have access to the donor. And to the organ donation. Because that child today is still alive. Her mom has since died. But this bill gives hope that perhaps someday, whether here or otherwise, that she may be able to be the recipient of a liver transplantation. I also would want that the Honourable Minister and her team review the financial support available for families like that are connected to, say, for instance, this child and others who cannot afford to go outside of Barbados for these very rare cases for intervention. And we need to look at these welfare cases and scrutinize these cases, because sometimes the fact that we cannot do the interventions in Barbados is actually costing the life for a child or an adult who might be able to access that care outside of Barbados. And maybe we need to have additional resources. Maybe we need to look at how we can collaborate with universities or medical hospitals outside of Barbados where we have those situations, because the fact that this little girl is still alive says to me that there may, if the intervention had happened when she was 6, 7 years old, that she may have been able to have a better quality of life. But she was denied the ability to have it here in Barbados when an option exists outside of Barbados. And she should not, no child, no adult should be denied at least the opportunity to be able to access that care if we are able to team up with people outside of the country to make sure that we can get our people outside of Barbados. So while I support this bill, Mr. Speaker, I believe we must ask important questions about implementation, because legislation really creates just the framework, but implementation does not save lives. It therefore requires of the Honourable Minister to indicate after proclamation when can we expect the National Transplantation Council to be established, when will the necessary regulations be completed, and are they in current draft? How soon can we get an idea of how this will actually function? When will the designated transplant officers be appointed and trained? Perhaps the most important question is, do we have the full team of expertise available to us on island? I agree we can look to the region, but where are our relationships going with international hospitals abroad and other countries to be able to ensure that we can strengthen the teams that we have here? I recall when I think it was the Chinese team had brought a ship here recently, how many Barbadians were queuing up trying to be able to get basic tests done that they can't get done in real time within the QEH in the current time. And I think that those types of partnerships are not simply a reflection on where we are, but they are to be encouraged, because any country or any other body, medical body that is able to provide the support and the assistance to our healthcare facilities ought to be encouraged, ought to be targeted, and ought to become our partners as a matter of urgencies. These are not merely administrative questions, Mr. Speaker. They are questions of urgency for patients currently living with end-stage kidney disease and their families. Many Barbadians spend their lives connected to the dialysis machines while waiting for the possibility of transplantation. And they deserve not only hope, but confidence that this hope will become a reality. Mr. Speaker, we have learned from previous experiences in healthcare that delays in implementing critical services can have serious consequences for patients and for families. I recall not too long ago, the fight to get the linear accelerator to replace the cobalt machine. Thankfully, those who have ears listen, and we were able to save now a number of people who were waiting for decisions to be made in relation to their care. Today, Mr. Speaker, this is no different. We need to move quickly in terms of the implementation for this bill, and I believe that there must be an accompaniment with this in short order for a clear implementation roadmap so that those who need transplantation today are not left waiting without the answers to some of these questions. Resource capacity, Mr. Speaker. Transplantation, from what I've read, requires more than just surgeons. You need nephrologists, you need anesthetists, you need nurses, you need laboratory scientists, you need pharmacists, you need transplant coordinators, psychologists, social workers, and many other professionals working as a team. And therefore, if there are gaps in our existing workforce, what is the plan that we have to address them? Are we expanding the specialized training? Are we, as I said before, building the regional and international partnerships with other transplant centers across the region and the world? Are we ensuring that the doctors and the current panel, who I appreciate are today working on another transplantation, do they have all the resources that they need? Because we cannot wait another 15 years before we see this acceleration. What I am asking today is for the urgency that the person who is waiting on this legislation or has waited on this legislation for the last decade, that they are in a position to know that some of these questions are going to be answered. With that, Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge and thank the healthcare workers who have brought us to this point. The nurses, the doctors, the laboratory professionals, the dialysis teams, the support staff, and the associations who have worked tirelessly to care for the patients, and not only kidney patients, but also others with chronic conditions. And as we enter this new era of transplantation, I believe we have to support them, not with just pronouncements, sir, but I believe we have to look at the collaboration, the training, and the investment. The success of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is not going to be measured simply by the number of clauses that is contained therein or how long it has taken to be drafted, which is a long time. It will be measured by the lives that we save, the suffering that we have reduced, and the hope that we have restored to the people of this country. It is going to be measured by the patient who no longer has to organize their entire life around a dialysis appointment. It is going to be measured by the family who receives more years with a loved one. It is going to be measured by the donor whose generosity allows another person to live. It is going to be measured by the allocation of the additional funds through the Social and Welfare Fund at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The options can do so without having to wait forever and ever. It will be measured by how long we take to fill the positions for the designated transplant officer. And it will be measured by the public education programs. And by those programs, we're talking about not just on this bill, but on the acceleration of programs to address the issues of chronic non-communicable diseases, which goes hand in hand with this as well. And it will be measured by the published regulations in short order. At its heart, Mr. Speaker, this bill is about hope. Hope for the Barbadians waiting for a second chance, and hope for families praying for more time. I therefore hope that today's bill, while a welcome change in how we approach healthcare, marks the beginning of a different trajectory in terms of how we deal with those who require the assistance that is necessary to enjoy a better life, and certainly for all those who are coming up who we are trying to get to eat a little better, not just in this place but other places as well, that we are able to ensure that we are moving towards reducing the number of chronic non-communicable diseases. So, Honourable Speaker, I applaud the effort on behalf of the Minister. I believe this is the second occasion where we've had some transformative legislation coming to this place in short order, and I therefore hope that we can continue on this trajectory, not just with the legislation, but in short order being able to bring all that is required to give teeth to the legislation that we pass in this place. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I am obliged.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank all honourable members for their contributions to this important debate. I want to also acknowledge that our leader, Prime Minister, has given her full support to this bill and is caught up in meetings elsewhere on the Parliament compound, but she wanted herself to be here to speak on this bill because it is such a significant piece of legislation. And so as I wrap up, there are just three things that I want to share. I started by speaking in my opening comments, and I've heard based on what many of the members here have spoken about the challenges of the number of persons who are awaiting transplant, about the number of persons who have approached and asked for help in different ways. Let me start by saying that I'm very conscious of the fact that I stand in the chamber. I come from the other place, but I stand in a chamber surrounded by members of Parliament. Not one and not the other. All of you, members of Parliament representing constituents for whom this bill is meaningful. All of you, and not one or two of you, have had instances where you have come to me or my predecessors and you've raised concerns on behalf of your constituents. There will be a time, and I assure of that, where I will speak to many of the broader issues beyond what is before us today. But today, I am taking the opportunity after 40 years of advocacy and the Barbados Kidney Association being here today from morning until now, still sitting here and having spent the entire time in the other place to keep my attention firmly focused on them and why they are here today and this piece of legislation that they have stood in the gap for almost 40 years. There's nothing more important to our members who are sitting here, from the BKA, from the president to the vice president, and all of the members who are here, and those who are right now in surgery in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, including the Transplant Links charity that is headed by Baroness Benjamin, and I'll tell a little story about Baroness Benjamin in a minute. They're on island for the transplant that I opened my comments with today, and they're at the hospital supporting that. They have also facilitated training of the Barbados Kidney Association and those who have the benefit, who want to be able to reap the benefits of this legislation. Today is for them and nothing else. I will not be distracted by anything else on a day like today. The second thing that I will say is that a few years ago I was on a flight I was going to the UK, and this lady approached me and she recognized me from, I guess, the media, and it was interestingly Baroness Benjamin. And at the time, it was right after COVID, and she had not been able, wanted to restart the transplant program, and they were quite supportive through their charity. And she said to me at the time, I wasn't then Minister of Health, but she said to me at the time, we want to be able to continue supporting Barbados. There was a moment where, especially during COVID, there was not a lot happening, but we want to be able to continue supporting Barbados. And so here we are today. Today is also for persons like her who have long advocated, even on the outside of Barbados, in support of this legislation. Now, for each kidney transplant, and I took the time to ask the colleagues while I was sitting here about the average cost. Not every transplant surgery at this point in time can or is done at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital while we build up capacity. But in the instance where we're talking about kidney transplants, they can cost around $100,000 for each surgery, and that will include all of the screening, most of the medications, and I say most of the medications because not every medication, every drug is on the drug formulary. Some medications you have to pay for separately, but those that are on the drug formulary are covered 100% from the public purse. Same thing with the surgery, same thing with the hospitalization, same thing with the dialysis, same thing with the post-surgery care, and same thing with the maintenance of persons who have had these procedures done and who have chronic kidney disease. The support of the state has been significant. Do we live in a country where everything is perfect? Everything is available in every ministry so that we're always able to roll things out in the way that ideally we would like? No, we don't live in that world. We don't live in that country, and none of us serve, not one of us as cabinet ministers serve in those ministries either. There are all kinds of things that we know require systems and transformations and reforms in order to be able to deliver on behalf of people. And this legislation is no different. When we spoke about an organ, a tissue bank, in the legislation it covers the tissue bank, but I wanted to put some clarity around what we mean when we talk about a tissue bank, especially for members of the public. Barbados has already, that many people understand, a blood bank where you go, you take blood, people go and they donate blood. People have campaigns where they advocate for persons who have had serious accidents or they have serious illnesses and they need blood donations. And so those persons go to the blood bank. This is not quite the same. It is not to say that for organs that there is a bank where these organs are kept and stored for weeks or any extended period of time. That's not the reality. In the case of an organ donor bank, these are usually done immediately. And what it mainly maintains is a registry of recipients who are awaiting transplant. Then you're able to do the tissue matching. So you're able to identify who, as a recipient, is awaiting what type of organ and does it match having done all of the screening work. And then usually the surgery takes place almost immediately because the organs are not stored for a very long time. But this bill, much like what we have already been doing for blood, much like what we're going to be doing here now for tissue, much broader than just blood, is built on something that already exists in Barbados. One, voluntary consent. I consent to have my blood taken and put in the blood bank. Two, I consent to my organs to be taken and given as a live donation. I consent, if I have passed, for my organs to be taken and used after my passing. That already exists. Altruism, people responding to fear and to need and to someone else's need to be able to get past a difficult medical situation. Protection of human dignity, making sure that those who have passed and whose organs are being donated are treated with dignity and their family can celebrate their life with a dignified funeral, while at the same time being able to honor the fact that their organs are being donated to an anonymous person. Rigorous medical oversight. In Schedule 1 of the legislation, which is here before this chamber, it outlines the provisions of the National Transplantation Council. And so this legislation, which I believe is available for all members, it outlines the composition of the persons who are there. So mercifully, as I go away from here today, I don't have to figure out who is to be appointed. The National Transplantation Council has 1, the Chief Medical Officer, 2, the Director of Medical Services at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, 3, a medical practitioner with knowledge of human tissue transplantation on the nomination of the Barbados Association of Medical Practitioners, 4, an individual who is qualified or otherwise experienced in bioethics, 5, a nurse on the nomination of the Barbados Nurses Association, 6, an attorney at law of at least 10 years standing with medical legal knowledge on the nomination of the Barbados Bar Association, 7, a nominee of an NGO with an interest in human tissue transplant. I wonder who that would be. And then finally, a beneficiary of human tissue transplantation or a donor of human tissue. That is the composition, Mr. Speaker, of the Transplant Council. It's not been after we leave here, and so my expectation in response to the queries that were raised is that the legislation in Schedule 1 already establishes how the council is to be comprised, and we can take comfort in knowing that that does not require a lengthy period of time for its implementation. That really is my summary at this point in time. I think a lot has been said, all of which I am supportive of. I am very much looking forward, as Minister, to be able to work across all ministries. The Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Finance, the ministries on the ground in the communities in support of community development. I'm looking forward to being able to work also with the other non-governmental organizations, those who are working on NCD management, changing the way in which we see our food consumption, dealing with how we deal with the school nutrition policy, as was mentioned in the Ministry of Education, so that the lifestyle choices that are being supported in this legislation translate items, working with the Ministry of Agriculture on healthy food consumption. But today, those are all constituent components of an important bill that we are presiding over here today. This bill, 40 years in the making plus the last 12 years or so in review, over the last 6 months in active development. And I think I heard the Minister in the Ministry of Health when he spoke earlier, he talked about, I think it was the Attorney General actually said it was not necessarily a perfect bill. But we can't wait for perfection, because in the meantime, people are still getting sick. People still need treatment. People still need to be able to move beyond medication and dialysis and have the benefit of transplants. Not just a live donor transplant where there may not always be that person who's willing to give a live organ, but now, after today, I hope if we're able to pass this bill to have the benefit, finally, of a tissue transplant, an organ transplant from a deceased donor who has chosen to give the gift of life. This is important legislation, and I am grateful for the support of this honourable chamber and all of its members. With these few words, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill is read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and the Honourable the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, permission to call the bill in parts.
Permission so granted.
Part 1, clauses 1 and 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 and 2 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 and 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 3 to 6.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 3 to 6 do now stand part.
Wait a second.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 3 to 6 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, sorry. Part 3, clauses 7 to 9.
The question,
No, hold on, wait.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 7 through 9, stand part.
the question is that Part 3, clauses 7 to 9, stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 10 to 13.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 10 to 13, do now stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 10 to 13, stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 14 to 20.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 14 through 20, do now stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 14 to 20, stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 21 to 22.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 6, clauses 21 and 22, do now stand part.
The question is that Part 6, clauses 21 to 20 and 22, stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, clauses 23 to 28.
Mr. Chair, there is an amendment. I'd like to move an amendment at clause 23(1). I think in the other place we indicated that where there is one witness being required in accordance with the requirements of the Succession Act, that it would be amended to reflect 2. 1 has already been changed at paragraph 1, and we beg to make that change at paragraph 3 as well.
Mr. Chair, when this matter was debated in the other place, concern was raised by myself that there were provisions in here for witnessing the consents. And in some instances, it was one person witnessing. In some instances, it was two persons witnessing. Because some of these consents carry over until post-mortem, posthumously, sir, it was deemed appropriate to make it compliant with the Succession Act, which requires a testamentary disposition to have two witnesses to it. So Will has to have two witnesses. So we cleaned it up by agreement in the Senate that wherever you had to witness a consent in this piece of legislation, it would be two witnesses and not one. The change was made in one of the places where it was required, but in 23(1)(2), the change was not made. It was agreed in the other place, but the change was not reflected on this piece of paper. So just for tidiness, sir, we're drawing it to attention that that should actually be two. It was agreed in another place, and it can be dealt with as a typo, I guess. But as it's here in the face of the document we're dealing with, I'm asking that the clause as amended stand part.
Which clause?
Mr. Chair, with that explanation, I beg to move that the clause as amended do now stand part.
The question is that clause.
Clauses 23 to 28.
The question is that clauses 23 to 28 with the amendment at clause 23 as amended stand part. The question is that clauses 23 to 28 as amended stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, clauses 29 and 30.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 29 and 30 do now stand part.
The question is that Part 8, clauses 29 and 30 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 9, clauses 31 to 38.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 9, clauses 31 through 38 stand part.
Beg a second.
The question is that Part 9, clauses 31 to 38 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
I beg a second, sir.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill is read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this landmark piece of legislation do now pass and be cited as the Human Tissue Transplant Act 2026.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sitting, and I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until Tuesday, the 21st at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 21st day of July 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 21st day of July 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.